everyone joining, if you all can get onto mute, that would be great. As we go through this presentation, I bet you will have a series of questions to ask, or issues that you want us to address. That'd be great. If you could put it in your chat box, that will be fantastic. So what I'll go through it towards the end, and basically ask you all to come out of screen and ask the relevant question to the right member, and I'll point that question to the potential right member who can answer it, panel member who can answer it. So that'll be the way that we actually approach this. We'll try to keep it to time, but if there is an overrun because of the number of questions, we're happy to stay on, and you're more than happy to log off if you think that that you'll need to attend something on a Saturday, which I understand is pretty important. So I'll get straight into it and basically talk about the structure today. So the topic for today is, why is project management a great career choice? Now, I bet there are a few people on the call who may be considering project management as a potential career choice, but the challenge is that there is a huge demand, but not enough people are actually picking it up as a career. And the objective of this webinar is to get the word out, to talk about the potential career options that exist in project management, and then basically come to some sort of conclusion and help people in answering some of the questions that they actually have. So I'll talk a little bit about introducing EzySkills, about who we are, what the context is. I'll introduce some of our distinguished panel members and ask them to talk about their experience. And then I'll lead and I'll get Jeff to talk about project management concepts and frameworks, just as an overview, because there are quite a few of them around, and to give people an understanding of what they are. And then lastly, lead into a small presentation on the demand for project management globally. I'll talk about that as we actually go. And finally, into a panel discussion, where both the panel members and the audience can also actually raise questions as they seek. So the only request that I have, please put your questions in the chat box, and we take it forward from there. So in terms of EzySkills, basically we are an Australian online learning academy. We just launched last year with the objective of basically providing professional skills certifications and courses to the global market. And the reason this came about was primarily we saw a gap in the market, which the pandemic brought about, with people and training organizations basically being caught out in terms of being able to make that switch from traditional classroom delivery to e-learning. So that's the focus that we've actually taken. We'll only offer professional skills certification courses that are globally recognized, and we basically make sure that all our courses are accredited by international training organizations. And the advantage is that it's all about self-paced e-learning. You can study at your own convenience, anytime, on any device, anywhere. And the major plus point over here is that professionals like you and me and everyone else on this webinar are basically short for time. And that gives us the flexibility to add to our skill sets, or even add to our certifications as we go along. And the advantage is that it's all 24/7, and it's available, and it's available on a very safe platform. We've used some of the safest technologies and fastest technologies to actually enable us to deliver this content globally. So without further ado, our vision is pretty straightforward. It's to do with learning, getting upskilled, and getting certified. So it's targeted to professionals in any industry, those seeking a career change or transition, those seeking work who are looking to make a transition out of their current professions, or to just upskill and ensure that they perform better on their jobs. And also to corporates, basically, who are looking to upskill their staff using e-learning. So methodology is pretty straightforward. You basically get trained, you take an exam, in this case by an international body, and pass that exam and you get certified. The courses that we currently offer for professionals are across a whole range of skills. So to do with project management, we have Prince 2 project management, agile project management, risk management, which is based on management of risk, business cases, critical component for organizations to basically, before you actually get into projects, one of the first things that people do is develop a business case. and actually writing and developing effective business cases is critical for a lot of organizations. Another topical area is around change management. We offer courses there, also around program management. The program management MSP part has been completely rewritten by the team owner. So we are in the process of rewriting our MSP in program management, and this should be available online pretty soon over the next 3 to 4 weeks. Our courses are at 2 levels: foundation for beginners and then practitioner for advanced. So by advanced, we typically mean people who've got a lot of experience or some experience in project management or in risk or in change, and they're looking to be a registered practitioner in their space. So overall on site, we have around 15 courses currently available. I would recommend that actually have a look at these courses. There's a lot of information on the websites, and feel free to explore that. I'll get straight into it right now in terms of our panel members. Today we have Vikas. Vikas, are you there? Vikas is a senior business technology executive and professional, over 27 plus years of experience in the IT industry in India and globally, with a proven track record in professional services. Now, actually, Vikas has got a phenomenal experience in actually delivering hundreds of projects over his career. So he's actually got that hands-on experience, and I think he'd bring great knowledge and points to this discussion. Some of his roles, I won't touch on that much, is that being a global manager for Dell EMC, the cloud and cognitive business leader for IBM. He's worked at Microsoft, and he's currently the director of professional services at Global Cloud in India. Welcome, Vikas.
Thank you, Glenn. Great to be here.
Great. Muktesh is another panel member for today. Now, Muktesh has got over 27 years of experience in the IT industry here and globally. Very experienced in project management, program management, security, compliance. Some of his roles in the past that he's had has been head of IT at Sigma Aldrich, and he's currently also the president of the PMI chapter in Bangalore in India. So welcome, Muktesh.
Thank you, Glenn. Thank you.
Thanks. We've also got Duresh. Duresh is an experienced IT professional with over 20 plus years of experience in programs and projects and delivering change across organizations. He's currently, I think, he's transitioning to a new role, but his most recent role was as program manager for HR transformation. He's actually worked as a consultant in projects and programs in Ernst & Young, and he's also had significant experience as an HR advisor and business partner in his IBM days. So welcome, Duresh. I think you have great hands-on knowledge in the space. So thanks.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thanks for participating.
Thank you, Glenn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Not a problem. We also have Jeff Frankens. Jeff is a co-founder of EzySkills. Jeff has over 43 years of experience in project management, program management, benefits management. He has had significant experience both in designing and contributing to some of the project management frameworks that we have today. Fellow of the Australian Institute of Project Management. He's a member of the OPM3 group. In 2008, he was part of the 2009 review group of Prince2. He's member of the MSP 2010 review group. He's also been part of reviewing the MSP framework, which is managing successful programs currently. So this rewrite, Jeff has significantly contributed towards that along with other members. He's also a member of the Standards Australia Working Group, which developed the Australian standard and the New Zealand standard of 8015, which is now the ISO standard of 3805 for corporate governance. Welcome, Jeff. I think you'll have, Jeff will be walking through the various frameworks that exist in project and program management today. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Glenn. Hello, everyone.
And lastly, me, your host for today. Thanks. I've had around 30 years of experience in delivering projects and programs in virtually all shapes and forms in Australia, Western Europe, the USA, and India. Had past executive roles. I won't get much into it. You can read that into the screen. And hopefully today we can basically get straight into our discussion. So I'm going to hand over to Jeff. Jeff, are you there?
Yep.
Yeah. If you could quickly begin with just a brief overview of the various project management frameworks today, that would be great.
All right. So what I thought I might do is just a really high-level overview of project management. If you brought a group of project managers into a room, they'll probably disagree about everything. But this is a very high-level overview of what it means to be a project manager. And my point of entry is to think about why do organisations run projects. And the bottom line is that they run them to acquire assets or change assets or retire assets. But something about assets. And I thought, well, okay, let's look at this. When we're setting up a project to acquire an asset, we need to think about the nature of the initiative and select the most appropriate approach. It's not always the case, the best way to simply pick what we used before and try to apply it this time. So we need to be a bit more nuanced about the way we do that. And the way I want to talk about it is to think about these two aspects: clarity of objectives and scope, and tolerance for change. Some of the numbers here are quite arbitrary, like the 70%. It could be higher, could be lower. But on the left-hand side, we've got things like changing the production line of a factory to move from canning one product to canning a different product, for example. Very clear scope, very low tolerance for change. On the right-hand side, we've got a new product development. We simply don't know how to build it yet, but we need to run some activities to do that. So the scope, objective is a new project, scope is really unclear, tolerance for change has to be very high. And in the middle, we've got reasonably tightly constrained objectives and scope and some allowance for some tolerance for change. So like some construction project. So what techniques do we use? On the left-hand side, pure operations. If you want to take out an old machine and put a new one in, like a forklift in a factory, for example, you don't need much management control over that, apart from just maybe a bit of procurement, and that's it. On the far right-hand side, I can't see what it says there, but anyway, it's what we call agile. Most agile techniques are product development techniques. Some of them call themselves project management techniques, but they're not. Right in the middle is pure project management. And what I've seen is that for some operational change initiatives, it's sufficiently, the objectives or scope aren't where you'd want them to be, so they projectize those operational things. They take some aspects of project management and apply it to what they're doing. Not all the project management may be needed, they'll just pick the bits that provide the most value. And there's a bridge between pure project management and agile, which is called agile project management. It's a different way for a project manager to work. It's not suited to all project managers. It depends on their management style, but there are ways. And clearly in a large enough initiative, you might have all five of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of these things going in the same overall project. And we also scale things up. We give names like programs and portfolios for scaling these things up. Typically, a program or a portfolio consists of many projects. So that's where project management fits. We can ask the question, what is a project? And the typical answer is, as shown on the screen, it's in some terms of some sort of defined scope, defined cost, and expected duration, and those sort of things. Again, I think we need to be a little more nuanced than that. Think more carefully. And really, it depends on who you're asking. Right, so the client view of a project is clearly different to the supplier view of a project, and both of those are different to an end user view of a project. For example, a client might be focused on, they want their objectives met, they might have some cost constraints, but generally they're a little more flexible. They really would focus on the value proposition. On the end user view, they want the product, they're focused on the actual product, the deliverables, the quality of those things, and that's their primary focus. Another way to slice this is to look at the various layers of management that are involved in projects. I'm using sort of a Prince 2 approach here, but it applies to any sort of project. It depends which layer you're in, what things are important to you. And I think and the reason I'm showing this is it becomes important when you look at methods, management methods for projects. I found this interesting analysis in an academic paper. It looked at the sorts of, tried to group the sorts of projects by domain and came up with this set. So I worked information systems, telecoms, facilities, international development, business and organisational, this is organisational change, and defence projects, and a little bit of new product development work. Other people might have a different mix. And this is also important when we come to think about when we say project management, what do we need? The point of this is each of these domains causes problems for people who want to move across from one domain to another one. Just basic terminology might be different. The sorts of deliverables will be different. The common risks and mitigations will be different. The areas of uncertainty will be different. And that's why generally organisations, if they're running, for example, a telecoms project, they want someone with experience in telecoms projects so that the person has the relevant experience in terms of all of these things. So are all projects the same? And the answer is, well, clearly the domain-specific aspects of projects are different. Within a domain, there might be similarities, but even at this level, every project is unique. In this level, the domain-specific or project-specific aspects. But we can abstract to a higher level the sorts of things that end up in management methods, standard methods. How do we plan a project? How do we resource it, schedule it? How do we manage risk? How do we manage change to any aspect of the project? How do we deal with stakeholders? Management techniques, all of these things are similar across any sort of project. Right? So how did we get to where we are today from maybe 100 years ago? If you're a project manager with any sort of experience, you've probably built a Gantt chart. Well, they originated in America when America was preparing to enter the First World War. Wars are interesting because they actually focus the mind and generate a whole lot of innovation. In World War II, some of the biggest advances in project management were to do with how do you actually approach a really serious project with a really critical and really short time span where you're forced to do parallel development. And in my mind, this is the origin of what we call now agile product development. In the Second World War, it didn't start in 2001, whatever the date was. Project management as a discipline has developed over the years since then. In the 70s, various techniques, PERT and CPM, which are built into most project scheduling tools these days, came about. In fact, Muktesh can probably talk about this. The people who were expert in PERT and CPM in the 70s were the original founder of the Project Management Institute in the United States. Because they were the experts in those days in these modern, what they called in those days, modern management techniques. Another thing that happened in the 1970s is that for really, really large projects, and we're talking US military projects, the US military started to standardize project management, so building military standards in project management. In the 80s, there's a whole proliferation of techniques, various proprietary methods. Just about every method, not so much the agile ones, but every other method that I've used the last 45 years developed in the 70s and 80s. The proprietary methods are fine. So I've worked, for example, with methods by Ernst & Young, KPMG, PricewaterhouseCoopers, IBM, and some very large corporates. They all built their own methods. And clearly that's a problem if people are moving around from one organisation to another one. So in the 1990s, or starting in the 1990s, organisations started, or higher level organisations or nations started to think about let's move away from proprietary methods and move towards standards. So Prince 2 originated in the UK. Something called the APM is the Association of Project Management, which is the UK equivalent of PMI, produced a body of knowledge. The PMI in the US produced their project management body of knowledge, which the PMBoK became a component of the first American standard in project management. But then in the 90s and 2000s, higher level methods, MSP is a program management method, MRP is a portfolio management method, they were developed. In the 2010s, something called agile project management was extracted from a software development technique in the UK. ISO 21500 became the first global standard on project management. As Glenn said, I was part of the Australian input into that standard. And in 2014, something called the Praxis framework emerged in the UK. It was sponsored by the APM in the UK, but it's now a global framework. So what I might do is just talk about some of these frameworks at a very, very high level. Clearly, you can go into great detail in any one of these. I'm just doing it on one page, so not doing justice to any one of them, but high level.
Jeff, can we keep it short to a couple of minutes? We need to wrap up with this and move on.
Yep. So Prince 2, I've been involved in the 2009. It's now up to the 2019 version. Its audience is broad. Corporate project governance, project management. Its coverage is broad as well. Pre-project work. This is scoping, delivery, planning, and delivery, and then post-project, which is focused on benefits, which is quite good. PMBoK, the current version is the 2017 version. Its coverage isn't quite as good as Prince2, but nevertheless, it is a global method focused on construction and engineering. I have seen there is a new version. I have seen an exposure draft last year. That was only the principles. So the PMBoK is going to become a principles-based method. And then there are some significant changes. I've only seen one reference to that, which says that things like the process groups will be dropped, and that's a major change. We'll see what actually happens when they publish it. The APM PMBoK, it's a more generic framework. It doesn't necessarily have a process model built in. It's more like a basis for a competency assessment for an individual project manager. But nevertheless, it's a really good document for any project manager to read. The Praxis framework, again, its coverage is broad. It actually is a method which will provide project programs and portfolios, so that's very useful. The thing about Praxis framework is that it's free, and this library is the community-driven part. It's extending every day. So that's it, Glenn. Over to you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for the brief overview on project management and project management concepts and frameworks. I thought that we'd have a brief chat about that so that people on this call who are considering project management as an option, they would get a brief overview of the various frameworks, the various methodologies, and what project management is all about. Don't worry, in terms of the content of this presentation, we'll be sending that out by email to all attendees. Just bear with me while I share my screen in terms of next steps. I will get straight into it. Basically, talk about the main reason we're here today. So, and give you a brief overview as to why I thought that project management is just a great opportunity for people, especially during times of the pandemic, where they've been laid off from their current roles. They're looking at finding new jobs. And I think the project management industry in and of itself is growing quite rapidly, pandemic or no pandemic. Like, for example, the other day, I got a call from 2 or 3 recruiters in the last 3 or 4 days asking me about, who could I refer to them from a good project manager. And the shortage is pretty much all over the world. So in terms of the report that was created by Project Management Institute, I think it was early 2017, they had forecasted a shortfall of around 87.7 million jobs, people in project management. So what that meant was that there was an annualized shortfall of around 2.2 million project managers globally everywhere. There was a huge uptick in jobs requiring project management skills, and I think Jeff alluded to that across the various industries where project management is in use and also in high demand. For example, telecom, IT, the oil and gas industry, construction. It's just a few industries, but nearly every industry today globally has basically formulates investments in terms of projects. So a project should be seen as an investment, and as a result of that, it's treated in a certain way in terms of giving people the opportunity to develop skills in the area so that they could project manage these to completion. The attrition rates also in project management worldwide have been growing, with a lot of people actually retiring from project management. And obviously, there's been a significant uptick in demand for project talent, especially in the large growing economies such as China and India in particular. So that's the context for the presentation today. In terms of actual job growth, you see that in India itself, they require roughly 700,000 project managers. Nick, I know that you're from the Middle East. In the Middle East, roughly they're looking at 2,000, there's a shortfall of around 2,000 project managers annually every year. In Saudi Arabia, it's around 2,500. In some of the major economies like Brazil, there's a shortfall of 56,000 PMs across the year on an annual basis. So basically the demand for project management is across the board, across economies, across industries. My biggest question to the panel is, with such a demand in there, why is such a big shortfall existing in countries like India, for example? Because if you can take that question, or Mutesh, I open the discussion up to you. Why is there such a shortfall of 700,000 people inside India alone?
So maybe let me take a shot at that. It's like the challenge is that it's not been the case that people haven't been doing project management as a function.
Yeah.
Because that's only gone up, with the number of projects. I mean, the numbers that you have on the slide are telling by themselves. Recognizing that this is a function that actually needs expertise, it needs practical experience, and it needs a formal definition of a role, perhaps has been missing, and which is the reason why, I think there's not been as much incentive for people to be dedicated project managers in the past, as it's been just one of those things that they would do, as a part of what they would do. And I see that all the time with customers that I worked with. And I think that realization is now coming that this is a serious discipline. You need to bring in people who've got, not just expertise, but certifications, additional experience, have done it. And I think that's essentially now creating such a big demand. Now this being considered a serious discipline, people having dedicated experience.
Okay, because you raise a significant point there, because traditionally people have just landed in project management roles over time, and it's also the case of me when I began my career a long time back. We just ran projects. So as Jeff alluded to, we had certain companies develop project management frameworks like IBM and Pricewaterhouse and Accenture those days. So we were just learning to deliver projects. But with so many frameworks currently prevalent, why is there such a shortage? I still can't get my head around it. We have the opportunity today to be certified. We have the opportunity today to learn, to get to build these skills. Why isn't it happening? And why is there still such a shortage? Because from your perspective, as from a professional services organization perspective, what do you see as being the major challenges?
Is that a question to me, Glenn?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's the point, that the incentive to sort of do that, as dedicating yourself and using it as a career option, has probably not been as as obvious as it is becoming today. Just the way I can speak from an IT perspective. And that's the reason why, it's only now, or it's only the last few years that, now when you look for people, you're looking for, are you accredited? Have you taken, are you certified? Have you done mixed projects? Using those methodologies that you spoke about. So I think it's more recently that now you're looking for, project managers and program managers, who sort of come with their dedicated experience. And not just in the supplier side, because I think that side was, more mature about things. But even on the client side, I think that's where, you're now looking for more people. Now, again, not having, most of the avenues to sort of, get some of those trainings and certifications may have been one of the reasons why, you don't have people who sort of come in with that experience or those credentials. But I think that's probably changing now with what we're seeing today.
All right. Duresh, from your perspective, hands on the ground in terms of some of the reasons you see that there's such a shortage internally, and what are organizations doing? I mean, you're a program manager, you recruit project managers. What do you see on the ground?
Thank you, Glenn. So one of the things that I've seen in my experience is that not everybody recognizes the need for project management in the work that the organization is doing. And I've seen a lot of organizations launch many initiatives without realizing that the ability to deal with the technical aspects of delivering a project, regardless of the methodology you may choose or whatever the organization subscribes to, that is something that's necessary. And very often you will find on resumes, people will state amongst everything else project management skills. But how do you assess and make sure that if you are hiring somebody, to do a role that requires project management, that they really know what to do. And very often the people who are doing the assessments and doing the hiring themselves aren't equipped to make that kind of an assessment. And I think
correct.
That's one of the, I'd say that's one of the mistakes that a lot of organizations make, not ensuring that even though project management is essentially part of what a role requires to perform, the skills that the individual has may not be there. And the successful companies and the ones that very often get their projects done, on time, within budgets, etc., are the ones that understand this in advance. Very often, the leaders themselves have been through experiences where project management has failed or the project has failed, and they realize that and know even before they get started that they need the right kind of skills, and they go looking for them, even if it means sometimes picking up, somebody on a temporary basis who would do nothing but manage the project. So that's what I've seen in my own experience, Jeff.
Right, Jeff, what's your take on it?
I'll just relate the experience in Australia. In the 1990s, a lot of middle managers found themselves without a job and being replaced by project managers. And the reason, what that really means, it's a different view of projects. My view as a project is a temporary business unit. A good project manager requires general management skills as well as techniques of managing projects. I would project that over the next 20 years, if a middle manager is doing the same sorts of things day by day or week by week or month by month, their role, given what we know is coming in terms of big data, artificial intelligence and so on, their role is more likely to disappear in the next 20 years. And I think, well, they'll be replaced by, we also know that the rate of change around the world is simply increasing. And what that means is we need a mechanism to manage that change. And we can just say project management is one of those techniques. So put those things together. Regular business-oriented middle managers will probably shrink as a career option. Project managers will actually increase as a career option over the next 20 years.
And that's been shown by the numbers in the report too. So I traditionally get, for example, people saying, I do know project management, and I said, really? They believe there are two types of people, that say this. One is, they've recently got a certification and they think they know everything about project management, and the others are in that bucket of what I call, I've learned it over the years and I know everything about project management. But the results that we see on the ground is that there are tremendous number of project failures that are happening. Do you think that the average, if I remember a few years ago, looking at a survey that was conducted, that 70 to 80% of projects fail? Is that attributable to the lack of knowledge in project management? Vikas, Mukesh, feel free to jump in.
Yeah, so thanks, Glenn. This is Mukesh here. So a couple of observations. First is, I think there's a huge assumption that the project managers are only required in the IT space, right? And PMI has done a huge amount of exercise and a lot of surveys and found that some of the other domains, so to speak, are totally neglected, especially the engineering and construction factor, the oil and gas sector, the retail sector. So when people come out into the market, they all like to get into maybe only the typical IT space. But the huge number of the gap that you see today is because the other domains have also woken up to the need for project managers, so to speak, especially when you see 60-70%, and most of us being in India, you see the construction projects take ages to come in, right? So you could see maybe you and your kid coming and seeing the same project running. It could be a flyover, it could be an airport, it could be a roadway, etc. So what is happening is that that is one. The second piece that I think I'm going to make a very blasphemous statement here is that the younger generation, Gen Z, do not have the patience to sit around for 3 years or 4 years to take a long haul in trying to understand project management. they all like, just like my kids do, they want a fast food piece that, you take a pill and then you understand project management. It's not what it takes. There's a huge long haul that they need to get into. So to answer your question, why do projects fail is because they would have only understood one particular way to do it. They wouldn't have had their hands dirty. It's the same example like what I took today morning. I woke up and I saw that my net just went down. What would happen? Some people would crumble. We do plan B, plan C, plan D. We plan for it from the beginning.
Yeah.
So it is a myriad of different combinations, that would, so to speak. One is the technology obsolescence, the number of domains coming into the system, the fact that the Gen Z do not have patience for it. I think some of these are really contributing, and I think Vikas and all of us can agree that the younger generation are a little more difficult to convince on a long haul.
So the biggest challenge to Vikas and to you guys on the panel, my question is this: we have 700,000 shortfall, for example, in India. How do organizations approach this? Is it being taken seriously through certification? Do people offer training within the organizations? Because from your perspective, what's happening currently within Google, for example, or even in your past roles in IBM, etc.? Can you share that from a broad industry perspective that you've seen?
I think I'll draw from something you just said earlier. I think Muktesh alluded to that as well. Can we afford 7 or 8 of the 10 projects to fail today? Yeah. And again, I sort of go into the more, because that's where I come from, the IT background. I mean, the nature of the IT projects themselves have changed. If you had asked a CIO 5 years ago on what are the big things on your plate for the next, 18 months, 2 years, and they would talk about these 2 or 3 big mega projects. I'm doing an SAP rollout, I'm doing a data center, consolidation or whatever. And those would be the big things that would be on a CIO mind. Today, if you go ask a CIO, what are you doing for the next 12 months? Well, it will say, I don't even know what I'm doing for the next 12 months. For the next 3 months, I'm doing these 100 projects. And each of these projects have got a very clear business goal. They're being sponsored by either my marketing or my sales or my engineering. And these are essentially all part of what's being quote unquote called digital transformation. Now, the stakes have gone up so tremendously, and the outcomes that are expected are being so agile in expectation that you simply can't afford, 7 of those 10 projects to fail. I mean, absolutely not. And that's the reason why I think now organizations are waking up to this reality that, look, if this is going to be such a fast-paced, highly complex, broad, kind of a landscape that I will have to work with, or we will have to work with, we will need people, who can actually do this successfully and take us across the line. And I think that's the reason why it becomes so important for organizations today to look for their expertise.
Correct. The other question that I had was, this whole relation thing around project management frameworks, because there are so many of them. And for anyone wanting to start off in project management, I get that traditional, thing of saying, I'm certified in PMP or I'm certified in Prince 2. And I keep telling them that you need to be certified in as many as you can, because organizations today use multiple frameworks and basically customize them for delivery, especially the large global organizations. Is this true? Do you see that happening, Muktesh, within your experience and currently?
Yeah. Okay. So the thing is that you're right that we do expect people to have certifications, but the problem is a lot of people say people who don't do teach, right? Yeah. So we have that kind of a problem in terms of when people come heavily loaded with certifications, they already come with a certain perceptions and minds. They're not adaptive, like what Vikas said, that they're not agile enough. So what we do is that as long as they have the basics right with them, which is what we ask for, and they have the eagerness to learn and be adaptive, that is what we look for. A guy may come with a multitude of certifications, so to speak, and he'll say, I'm Prince 2 certified, or I'm XI certified, etc. per se, and he will come with a certain chip in his on his head, and he will refuse to do it any other way other than what he has been taught. And that becomes a challenge for us, because then he's not flexible enough, he does not get adaptive enough. And so we have a challenge, and that's what we do, is that we have incubation centers in TechM. TechM is 120,000 people strong, and what we do is we have incubation centers where we have incubations for project management, for say DevOps, for RPA kind of activities, and we have live projects which they run, and we have people from the service lines who would actually come. It could be some of the service lines who would come and tell them what is the market all about. So what it does is it gets them to unlearn what they have learned and gets them to be more adaptive. So certifications in itself is not enough. They need to be adaptive enough, if that's the question we are asking for.
Correct. I think, from my perspective, and we've hired project managers across the board, I find that because when we use a hybrid of various frameworks, etc., and depending on the complexity of the program or depending on what's actually required, the speed of delivery is another major issue. So when we actually look at it from an executive perspective, we say, all right, we need to structure it in a way that we can deliver to time and on budget. How do we do it? We are not caught on to any given framework like Prince2 or Agile, etc. So I think, from a broad skills perspective for a project manager, I think you need to be across as many frameworks so that when people use the terminologies, you can actually adapt and learn quickly on the job and actually deliver to, on time and within budget. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I think they need to walk the talk. One is the project manager has to come in early in the system. A lot of times what happens is there's a subtle tussle between the marketing or the sales guys and the delivery. Delivery comes in very late, and a hot project gets thrown onto the lap, and they ask to take over. And in most cases, what happens is that they don't get a buy-in from delivery for a project, and sales guys just want to get the numbers done. So there are a lot of times when the project manager is blindsided by the scope or by the technology or by the skill sets, so to speak. So he definitely needs to have an adaptation of what the frameworks would look like, and he needs to get up and start running at the earliest. So that's what I said. They need to be adaptive at the earliest.
Right. Just a quick question, and I'm going to ask the panel member, each one of them. As a hiring manager, what are the key things you would look for when hiring a project manager? Vikas, do you want to take that question?
So I think, first of all, looking at, practitioner experiences and, the kind of methodologies that they have deployed as they have practiced, project management. I mean, clearly that subject matter knowledge becomes, the table stakes in that sense. Then you start looking for more things that kind of add to that. A lot of the projects today are being conceptualized as products, really. These are capabilities that you hand over to a client, and they hand over to their users. These have to have, things that, allow them to be changed and adapt very quickly to how the users change. And you've got to bring in a product mindset to your project many times. And some organizations are mature to actually have product managers. A lot of times people expect their project managers to approach it, and guide it in a way you're building actually a product. And I think that becomes very important. I also think that, because, in the technology world, especially in IT, there are lots of things that are becoming very important for project managers to know today, and not just understanding, at least at some level, the technology itself, because most of these projects are becoming business critical. So you've got to understand security, you've got to understand, regulatory, expectations, that the client is going to have. There are lots of these things, and many of these projects have to be deployed over time on scale that was not even a consideration in the past. So these are cross boundaries across the globe sometimes. Now, those are the kind of experiences that become so critical, at the end of the day. And again, having some of those would be very, 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 very nice to have in a project manager. And I'll go back to something Jeff said. At the end of the day, this is a leadership role. So IQ is as important, or EQ is as important as IQ. And you look for that too.
Yeah. You know, I'm going to ask this question to Duresh. Duresh, you hired project managers. What are the key things that you look for in hiring a project manager?
I think the most important thing, Glenn, is the ability to listen and understand what is being asked and what is being required, but then to apply independent judgment to understand where the client may be missing out on things that are going to be important eventually. To be able to not only just control the scope of what is happening, but fill the scope gaps as well for not only the good of the client, but to ensure that the project stays out of trouble. And to me, being able to listen and understand and suspend one's personal judgment of what you think should be done or not done, and ensure that you're very clear about what the objectives are and do all those things and only those things which are necessary to meet the objectives. And that's where, you know, being able to handle the politics that comes along with having to do projects is also something that is important in any project manager, I think, and that's what I would look for.
Yeah. I have a question for Jeff. Jeff, you know, there are some people on this call maybe who are looking to transition into career, become a career project manager, because you know, one of the key things is that the job opportunities that exist are great, and at the same time we have a good salaries associated with it, because it's a skill that's in high demand and it's much appreciated globally. So how would, to ask you a simple question, how can someone transition to a career in project management?
It might depend on the organisation whether they're willing to do it. Let's just call it an apprenticeship scheme.
Yeah.
Just coming back to what some others have said, what would I look for in a project manager? Certifications are nice, but I'm also wanting to look at, let's call them behaviours. So are they, is the person willing to learn, or is the evidence of that? I don't want them to say that, I want them to show me. Like, the way the world is at the moment, everything is changing really rapidly. And if you sit on your laurels for, I don't know, 5 years, it's quite likely that your skill set will become out of date. So keep learning. I want to see evidence that people are continually learning as a matter of practice. If you want to talk about professionalism, that would be an attribute of a professional project manager, to continue to learn. And the soft skills side is really important. Just tongue firmly in cheek. I sometimes say that when I'm hiring a project manager, if they actually came with a degree in psychology and maybe even psychiatry sometimes, that might really help in some organisations. It's the people side. How do they understand people, not just the people within their teams, but the senior managers they have to work with?
I'd just like to wrap it up by saying thanks for attending, and thanks for participating, especially to our esteemed panel members. One of the key things that I wanted to talk to you about and pick up from where Jeff left was this whole thing around upskilling yourself constantly because of the rapid change in technology and rapid change in what businesses want and do. So towards that end, we are launching a new tech academy to deal with various changes in the technological landscape that we see afoot already in the last 12 to 18 months. So if you've ever wanted to know anything around blockchain technology, these new terms like machine learning, you know, artificial intelligence, the Internet of Things, containerization, cybersecurity, and as Vikas said, all project managers at some stage now or into the future are going to be dealing with projects that touch these various domains. So just keep following our LinkedIn page. We'll be launching this Tech Academy online. It's purely e-learning based, and we'll be launching all of this online towards the end of March, early April.
Can I ask a question, Glenn?
Sure, not a problem.
My question to you is, we've been rambling around doing project management, or what we thought was project management, for all these years. And I've dealt with engineers, managers, but the methodology was simply get around in a huddle on a weekly basis or a 2-day or a 3-day basis, or sometimes coordinate on an email. Can you give us a few tips where people whom you're addressing are not expertly evolved in project management, and how do you evoke a quick something like an easy guide which says these are the 3 or 4 steps that you need to keep in mind to elicit the right response in doing a project? I've done restaurants, I've done an expedition to Antarctica, I've done launching a hotel, e-commerce website, but without really knowing the real tools of project management. Yes, I'm going to learn them, but in the interim, if I were to use this as a selling pitch, what are the 3 or the 4 most exciting things that you can evoke interest with? Diresh, Vikas, Muktesh.
Over to you, Muktesh, to answer that one.
Sure, I could. Samir, thanks for the question. I think the first and foremost is we need to get everyone involved, and they need to be equal partners in the project, so to speak. Now, what happens
Correct.
is, in most cases, they're not. It becomes an idea from one particular person, until the time it gets inculcated and it becomes a need for all the other partners.
They take ownership of all the aspects of it.
So that needs to be very clearly correct. And project management, everyone plays different roles in the project. So you cannot have everyone being the project manager, then it will fail, right? So each so you have different cogs in the wheel. So you need to understand what role each particular person needs to play, and you need to make them understand how important their particular role is in that particular project. Now, if everyone typically comes and says, "Oh, I only want to manage people," I will have 5 project managers, but I'll have no one dirty
no soldiers, all
right?
chiefs.
Right. So what you need to do is you need to get people for their strengths. You need to understand, what is it that they are going to deliver in that particular project, and each role has to be particularly identified and also explained as to why that particular role is important in that project, and if any one of them fails, what would it do to the project. So it is a collective journey, and it cannot be driven by force today. Earlier you used to do that. Customers failure and their failure, all these things have to be taken into account. So you can decide the frequency, whether you want to do it once a week or you want to do it a standing meeting, and you need to do agile based 15-minute call. It all depends on a need to need basis, and if your need is, and I would also suggest that the goals should be shorter, and the attention span of people is very short nowadays. If you tell them, give me something after 3 months, and after 3 months you'll see nothing has happened, nothing has moved, doesn't work that way. So we keep shorter goals. We give them around 2-week goals, and then see how they do. And a pat in the back really helps go a long way. Hope that helps.
So you've said ownership, you've said clearly defined roles, you said short-term goals and appreciation.
Absolutely. And each role is as good as or as important as the other. So you cannot glorify one against the other. So that is very important piece to do.
Are there any other questions from anyone?
I hope that helped you answer your questions.
Sure. Thank you, Muktesh.
Are there any other questions from anyone? Right. So I just wanted to, I think we've reached nearly an hour, and I just think that being a Saturday, people would want their time back. I just wanted to thank everyone for actually attending this seminar. And as part of the seminar, we've decided to offer a special deal for all our project management courses online. For those who considered basically, I always want to do it, but I've never had the time. This e-learning opportunity is just a fantastic way to get started. We're offering a 50% discount. Please use this code, whether you want to do a foundation course, or a practitioner course, or basically both the courses together in either Prince2 or Agile Project Management. Leave the option open to you. We have the special offer for all our webinar participants. It's open for another week. So I suggest that if you'll ever wanted to understand or get certified in project management, help your professional careers, make sure that you'll actually use the score to effective use, because we will not be doing these sort of offers again. So that this is a special one-time offer. Please take advantage of that. And coming over to the last bit in terms of the EzySkills advantage, as I keep selling and telling everyone, it's all about e-learning. And it's important that we basically focus on what Muktesha said and what Jeff has said and Vikas has alluded to, that we need to constantly upskill. Thanks, Muktesh. Thanks, Vikas. Thanks, Diresh, Jeff, for participating on this webinar. Thanks, everyone. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Have a good day.
You. Thanks.